Hey, welcome back, gang. Day 2 of the AP Micro Review. Today, we get to talk about one of my favorite things to teach, something that students typically enjoy learning about, which are externalities. And today, we're going to focus on positive externalities. Tomorrow will be negative externalities, so you'll get both each day. So, welcome back. My name is Mr. Pedlow, teaching from Chelsea, Michigan. So, two things to go over real quick before we start. One, to reiterate what we started with yesterday. Why are we doing things from the last unit, which won't be asked on the test? Because if colleges are going to give credit, they want to make sure that students have gotten the full course. And then the second thing is students, if you can ask your teachers, or teachers, if you're watching out there, one of the things that College Board's recommending is to open up the AP classroom. So kids have access to some of the questions, the progress checks, things like that. And they can go on there and search for things that they want to look at and delve more deeply into. So we'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow as well. So today we're going to get started here. Welcome back. Hopefully you guys did your homework that we assigned. It probably took about 90 seconds. And so that's what we're going to start with today. So if you have a notebook, that would be wonderful. We're going to do some more graphs. Every day we're really going to focus on graphs because as a FRQ exam, one of the things that we want is I really want to make sure you guys get as many points as possible. So we're really going to harp on labeling, shifting, all that stuff. So this is where we left off yesterday. This should look familiar. I'm going to go through this with the answers. We're going to talk about what we did yesterday and how that applied. So yes, yesterday was part of that unit that's not being tested, but as you can see, this all could be tested. So let's go through A, and we'll kind of point this as well. We're not going to get too official, but it's good for you guys to know, like, all right, it's about 10 points and I got 9. That's a solid 5 in a normal year type thing. If I got 8, yeah, it's probably in that 4 or 5 range. This year, we don't really know how that's going to work. So A, how does a monopolist determine its profit maximizing level of output and price? You get a point if you said you go where MC equals MR, and then you get a second point if you said then move up to the demand curve for price. So 2 points. B, using the information, identify B1, the profit maximizing level of output. So if you go where MC equals MR, go straight down, you're at Q1, and B price, you'd go up and over, and that would be P5. So hopefully you guys, I would assume for most of you guys, this is some easy review going over this stuff. But if you look at this, right, MC equals MR, go down to Q1, and then up, and then over to P5. Let's get rid of that. Let's go to the old laser pointer. There we go. And then the segment of the demand curve that is elastic. If you remember, this is a little bit of review going back, and we are going to talk more about this. But you find where marginal revenue is 0, right there at, looks like Q3, and you go up at point D, and everything from A to D demand would be elastic. And if they said why, if there was an explanation point, which there's not, you would say because that's where marginal revenue is positive. And then C, suppose they become perfectly competitive without changing demand or cost curves, identify the price and output to prevail in the perfectly competitive market. Boom, this is exactly what we did yesterday. So you're going back to perfectly competitive, you know, perfectly competitive market, that's where price equals marginal cost. So right here at point C, so it says the output and price. So it looks like Q2 and P4, that would be another point. So now we're about 5 points-ish. And then D1, identify the area of consumer surplus for another point for the monopoly. So if they're setting the price at P5, it would be ABP5, triangle above that. And for the perfectly competitive industry, now you're going AC over to P4. When doing this, you don't have to put A with arrow to C, anything like that. You can just say ACP4. Remember, it's easy for the readers, right? Start up here, go right down, and then over, kind of makes it easy and uniform. And then E, for another point, define allocative efficiency. Simple definition, that's where price equals marginal cost. If you wrote down it's where marginal benefit equals marginal cost, totally fine as well. But you know, the old Bill Clinton campaign, keep it simple, stupid, kiss, right? Price equals marginal cost. And then F, to be allocatively efficient, what level of output should the monopolist produce? So once again, if you're allocatively efficient right here, and that's down at Q2, so you always have to go down. Remember, don't put C. C's not an output level. C's just a point on the demand curve. So you'd want to say Q2, and then G. So if the monopolist is producing at Q1, but allocative efficiency is out here at Q2, then you guys are smart. You need to produce more. Taxing someone is not going to make them produce more. So giving them a per unit subsidy. And I don't want to spend too much time on why, because we are going to get over this in a couple of weeks. But the answer is because it lowers your marginal cost. And what happens is marginal cost curve shifts down and then hits over here, hits your marginal revenue in this area, and you're back to allocative efficiency. Okay, so that's why. All right, hopefully you did well. You know, if you're up in that 9-10 point range, somewhere in there, then you're doing great. Good for you guys. That'd be a good score. And I know for some of you guys, it was some review. So for today, let's talk about some externalities and what positive externalities are. So externalities are simply, you might want to write this down, jot some of these notes down, because we're going to keep some graphs along with this. It's the cost or benefit that affects a third party who did not choose to incur that cost or benefit. So this is kind of wordy, right? It's a cost or benefit, but I didn't ask to incur this cost or benefit. What exactly are we talking about? So before we get to some examples, let's talk about why. The biggest reason is there's a lack of well-defined property rights. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about the transaction cost, but one of the things, the biggest, if you Google right now externality, the first example that's going to come up is pollution for a negative externality. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. Why is that? Because if I own a business and I have chemicals and I need to dump out and I dump them, well, who owns the stream behind me? My neighbor does not own the stream. If I pollute it, no one really knows who owns it. Who am I polluting? There's not a lot of incentive for me not to do that. Obviously, there's a lot of incentive not to pollute, but you get what I mean. So it's a lack of the well-defined property rights. Okay, so it's a cost or benefit that affects a third party who did not choose to incur that cost or benefit. And let's look at some examples of positive externalities. So one of the things I've done on here, and hopefully this is working for you guys on YouTube, but I know the picture is going to be up in the upper right hand, unfortunately, my face, and I apologize. Maybe you can minimize it. This is as good as it's going to get. But I'm trying to move everything to the other side of the screen so it doesn't cover anything up. And so that's why things are kind of on that side. So you can see some pictures here of a college. Some of you in the Southeast Michigan area might recognize that picture. So positive externality, when there's a benefit to someone who is external, hence the term, it's an externality. So it's a benefit to someone who is external to the decision-making of whether to produce or consume the good. And boy, oh boy, what a time to be talking about positive externalities when the first example that I have up there are vaccines. This is the classic example. You open any textbook out there, college econ textbook, and you flip open the positive externality, the first thing they're going to talk about is vaccinations. And why is that? Well, look at what's happening right now, this race to get the vaccine, right? Even though it's probably going to take a year and a half to get that vaccine out, companies are immediately in the marketplace. There's profit motive getting these companies looking for this vaccine. Does every person need to be vaccinated? Well, we would hope so. But if you could vaccinate 75% of us, the other 25% are relatively safe, because if in your room and 3 of the people are vaccinated, how could the 4th person ever get the coronavirus, right? Should make sense. So the thing is, we want everyone to be vaccinated. And that's why when you guys were born, most of you got all of your vaccines. When you have kids and they're a baby, and they give the kids a shots at week 1. It's amazing how many shots they get. But that's also why we don't worry about our kids, for the most part, getting mumps and measles and polio and these things, right? We have vaccines. So why landscaping? Well, if I have a neighbor and their house is beautiful, tomorrow we're going to talk about the complete opposite. But it looks like that picture you see down there, right? Some nice landscaping, some nice flowers. I've chosen not to enter this marketplace. I don't landscape. I don't do anything. How is there a positive externality? So if you go back to this definition, there's a benefit to me, and I'm external to the decision-making on whether to consume the services of having landscapers. So how am I benefiting? It's driving my property value up. Because if someone drives through my neighborhood and they see enough homes that have really nice landscaping, they start making some assumptions. People care about their homes. It's a nice neighborhood to live in, things like that. So even though I haven't done anything, there is an external benefit to me. That being said, if I decide to do nothing, maybe there's an external cost to my neighbor, right? And so we're going to look at that tomorrow as well. So the problems associated, jot these down real quick. We're going to get over to our graphs. We're going to run through the problems when you look at these graphs. The first, the big one, the marginal social benefit is greater than the marginal social cost. So remember, marginal, additional. So the additional benefit to society is greater than the additional cost to society. So we're not recognizing that in the marketplace. We are not creating enough. There's not enough consumption at that level, or production at that level. Think about vaccines. When my kids were little, they're 18 and 20 now, but when they were much younger, I remember their sign up in the doctors and said, if you do not have health insurance, your vaccines will be charged. And it was a flat rate of like $16 per shot. And I remember looking on our bill, we had insurance, and they're about $90 a shot. Now, why would they do that? Why would they eat that cost, or what we call subsidize the rest of that cost? It's to get more people vaccinated because they want society to benefit. It's greater than the cost. Okay, that's number one. That's important. Number two, producers, they have little incentive to correct because of something that we are going to spend Monday talking about, which you'll really enjoy. Free riders are wonderful to talk about. Some of you might look at some of your friends and say, I've always known what you were. I didn't know what the term was, but you are a free rider. That might come up. So they have little incentive to correct the market failure. We've already talked about this. Number three, the government can provide what we call per unit subsidies. So the difference between a per unit subsidy and just a lump sum subsidy is a per unit is every time you do something. Every time someone gets a vaccine, they're going to subsidize it. A lump sum subsidy, here's an easy way to remember it. Your parents say to you, here's $100 at the beginning of the year. You get it at the end of the year if you get it. Well, here, you already got the money, get all A's. Well, you've got the money. There's probably not a lot of incentive to get A's. You've already got it. It's that lump sum subsidy. But if they said to you, we're going to pay you every time you get A's, now you know there's an additional benefit every single time you get that A. And so that's what a per unit subsidy is. And then it'll shift demand to the right, which we're going to see here in just a second. And last but not least, it's going to eliminate what we learned about yesterday. If you remember deadweight loss, the loss of total surplus in the marketplace, when you correct for externalities, you are going to remove that deadweight loss from the marketplace. So those are the problems associated with it. But hands down, the big one is right up here. The marginal social benefit is greater than marginal social cost. If you get a free response question and ever, or, I'm aware of this year, but if you're taking econ and they ever asked, how do you know there's an externality? That's what they want you to answer. They want you to look at the marginal social benefit and marginal social cost and see where it is. All right, ready to move on, I hope. So let's go and draw a couple graphs. I'm going to apologize already about my handwriting. This is as pretty as I can possibly make it. Actually, that's really good for me. So this is a positive externality. Go ahead, draw your supply and demand. Draw your price quantity, right? Lowercase p, lowercase q. Now, in a positive externality, the demand curve is going to shift. So there's two things you can label your supply and demand curves, right? Marginal private and marginal social. Since we know the demand curve is going to shift, the first one we're going to draw, we're going to label it marginal private benefit. MPB, marginal private benefit. Our supply curve is not only our marginal private benefit, but it's also our marginal social benefit. And I tell my students, you don't need to label it marginal private benefit. Just go ahead and label it your marginal social benefit, right? Society, theoretically more important than private, blah, blah, blah. Okay. If the question asks, where are they currently producing in a normal market? Right here, right? We call that equilibrium. But if you go back to what we just talked about, the fact that we are not producing enough of the good. So here's what you're going to do in a positive externality. Draw a new demand curve, right? Label it marginal social benefit. So now let's look at a couple things. First of all, you guys are smart, rational people. You have teachers like Mr. Duffer out there in Chicago, Mr. Held out there in Loyola, right? You guys got some great teachers. I know they've taught you this stuff, and they've taught you the big thing in econ, right? Our goal is to make you think rationally. We did that on day one when we talked about opportunity cost. So at this point, you guys start seeing things and say social equals social. Ooh, this is cost. Did I put benefit up here? Sorry, let's redo this. Let's label this marginal social cost. My apology. I was talking and not paying attention, okay? Not benefit. Benefits demand curve, cost are your supply curves. So your marginal social cost equals your marginal social benefit, meaning, you guessed it, that is socially optimal or allocatively efficient. So make your dotted lines down. Why don't we go ahead and label this QS, okay? And higher price up here, UP prime, use your arrows. Thank God the comments are closed because I can imagine what you'd say about my writing. So here is the socially efficient marginal social cost equals marginal social benefit, meaning we should be producing more vaccines in the marketplace. Let's go back to equilibrium. Okay, the original market equilibrium, not society. If you go on your dotted lines all the way up here, okay, this up here, if you look, this is our marginal social benefit. Stay on this quantity line, go right down here. This is our marginal social cost. What was the definition of a positive externality? Marginal social benefit is greater than marginal social cost. The benefit to society, there is an external benefit. So that brings up two questions. Can we figure out how much the external benefit is? Absolutely. It's right here. That's the line. Now, in a second, I'm going to show you using numbers. Second thing, if we're in a normal monopoly, or excuse me, a normal market, and we're not producing the socially efficient level, is there a deadweight loss? There is. And this is it. Okay. We should be producing out here, but we're not. We're not producing enough. So in the case of vaccines, what is that? So you can put a number to that. That's infection rates. That's hospitalization. We don't have enough vaccines. Boy, what do you think about this deadweight loss right now, right? What's going on? If we had a vaccine tomorrow, people would be in line to get this thing. They'd have their kids getting it. But right now, hospitals are overwhelmed. So quite large. We want to get that way out here to the socially efficient. So the second graph we're going to draw real quick looks like this. So go ahead. So marginal social cost, marginal private benefit, draw your new demand curve, marginal social benefit. And so using numbers in here, the quantity, I just put 100 and 200. The original market, $10. If you go back, $20. And then the socially efficient price, $15. Okay, so go ahead and draw that real quick. There we go. All right. So now I told you we can actually figure out how much that external benefit is to society. So if we're currently producing 100 vaccines, whatever it is, we can dot lines up, $10 each, okay? But we know the benefit, if you go up to your marginal social, at that quantity, the additional benefit to society is up here at $20. So 20 minus 10 is $10. That is the external benefit. So if we provide that in a per unit subsidy, everyone who goes in gets $10. So the government mails you a voucher. Take this to your doctor, hand it to them. And what's going to happen is it'll increase the demand. Remember, the price is not changing. Price does not affect the demand. This isn't. They're actually giving you incentive to do something that'll affect demand. Demand's going to kick out. And now it's going to get us out here. More vaccines. And so kids always say, yeah, but it's at a higher price. Yes, but you've been subsidized at $10. You don't care. Right? So theoretically, the price is falling. So that's what happens. You get out to your marginal social quantity of 200 at $15. That's it. So the easy way to remember this, whichever curve is going to shift, you start with private, the new curve is social. Whichever curve is not shifting, just go ahead and label it your social, because supply is always cost. We talked about that yesterday. You know that's going to be supply, right? Remember, marginal cost. And because demand curves are also known as marginal benefit, now you know how to label this thing. So let's do a couple practice multiple choice, just in case you guys get some questions, some explanation things, things of that nature. So let's do this. Let's go back to our PowerPoint. Oops. There we go. All right. Perfect. And back here we are. All righty. So this is the graph you guys just drew. This will probably be a little nicer. And what you can see here is if there were vaccines, okay? And there's a bunch of examples you can use. One of the examples, so neighborhoods and towns that, if you go into a neighborhood that decorates for Christmas, right? It's beautiful. We'll say it's all white lights, and especially the snow on the ground, right? A lot of people will say, why doesn't our whole neighborhood get together? people from all over will come in and say, what a nice community, things like that. And so maybe the town would subsidize that and give everyone $20 to go out and buy Christmas lights, things of that nature. In addition, if no one did that, or if only one person did, you can see what the opposite that would happen. So there's all kinds of examples you could use for this. But if we stick to this vaccine example, at the market, we're currently at P and Q, but we should be out here at socially efficient, right? And if you made your dotted lines and went all the way up, this would be your deadweight loss. So the easy way to remember this, you go to your original equilibrium and up, and you'll always see the triangle. And another little hint here, and hopefully you guys can see this with my laser pointer, but if you go up, this kind of looks like an arrow, right? So if you make your arrow right there, and what's that? The arrow points to socially efficient. Easy way to draw it. All right, so let's do some multiple choice practice, and then good news for today. I don't just have one, I have two for your response. So I know you're very excited. So number one, if the production of good X creates a positive externality, then from society's perspective, the industry that produces good X tends to produce. Okay, so you immediately know positive externality. Are we producing enough? Are we producing too much or too little? Well, we just got done showing, right, that the society wants us to produce more. The socially efficient is to the right. So you know it's not B. We're not producing greater. And you know we're currently not at C. And so we haven't talked about a surplus and a shortage, so you can knock those off. So you're left with A. Right? The industry that produces the good produces less than what is socially optimal of the good. Easy so far. They started you out easy. Number two, positive externality exists in the market for flu shots, right? Which of the following would be true? So go ahead, take about 30 seconds, read through these real quick. Okay, so A, as you read through it, you just move on. Positive externalities, we are not going to tax positive externalities, right? It really doesn't make sense. So we know we're going to get those off the market. C, the firm making the flu shots charging too low a price to reach the efficient level. That's not the problem, actually. So you can remove C. D, the firm making the flu shots producing at socially efficient. Well, no, if they were, there would not be an externality. Remember, when you get to the marginal social, or excuse me, to the socially efficient, there's no deadweight loss anymore. You've eliminated that deadweight loss, as we said earlier. So you know you can't be there. And then E, the firm making the flu shots is producing the socially efficient if it's perfectly competitive. Once again, no, there's a positive externality. So you go back to B. Once again, provide them a subsidy. And then number three, if the production of a good generates a positive externality, the government can increase allocative efficiency. So your brain immediately says, that's where price equals marginal cost, or marginal benefit equals marginal cost, or in this case, where marginal social benefit equals marginal social cost. And so how do you do that? B, once again, you subsidize a producer, they get them out to marginal social benefit and marginal social cost. All right, here's what we're gonna do. We got two free response. One, let's do together, and I'll walk you guys through this. The second one I'll put up there, I'll give you a couple minutes. And while you guys do it, I'm gonna talk over you, and I apologize, I do this all the time in my classroom. We'll talk about a couple articles. I'm gonna start doing this on most days, kind of current event stuff. And those of you who are seniors will probably like what we're gonna talk about today. So medical vaccine is produced, so sold in a perfectly competitive market. There generates a positive externality in consumption within the society. So you're gonna draw a properly labeled graph for a competitive market. So go ahead and draw a market graph. You should remember what these look like. Make sure you have your price and quantity. Hopefully your writing is much nicer than mine, so you get all the points, and don't make us readers squint trying to read this stuff. So label your P's and Q's, right? And if you remember your first demand curve, because it's not shifting, that is going to be marginal private benefit. Or excuse me, it is shifting, so it's gonna be your marginal private benefit. And then your supply curve is not, so you're gonna go ahead and label that marginal social cost. Okay. And then it says label the market equilibrium quantity QC. Go ahead and label that. And then socially efficient. All right, so what do you have to do, right? Draw your new demand curve. In a second, I'm going to show you my graph. But draw your new demand curve, shifting to the right. Feel free to use arrows. Label it marginal social benefit. And where marginal social benefit equals marginal social cost, make your dotted lines down and go ahead and label this QS. And don't forget on the AP test, if they tell you to label something QS, don't forget to label QS, okay? And then the area of deadweight loss. All right, so let me flip over here. Let's do this. We can do this way. So far you should have that right there, right? Okay, so far so good. So it says, show the area of deadweight loss. Once again, go back to your original equilibrium always and go up, make your dotted lines up, and this shaded area right here, I said here earlier, look, kind of an arrow right there pointing to socially efficient, that's your deadweight loss, okay? Then it says, let's see here, let's go back to this real quick, and then okay, let's go over to here, there we go, and then all right, identify one policy action that would lead to the production of the socially optimal. Well, that's what we just talked about, right? Easy answer, per unit subsidy. And then the bottom one, would a binding price ceiling result in the production of the socially optimal quantity? This is exactly what we did yesterday. So hopefully you're like, man, this is all coming together. It's all making sense. If you put a price ceiling below, all you have to do is stay on that line until it touches your quantity supplied, make your dotted lines down. You'll realize very quickly, that's not good. Right? They're not producing enough of the good. So let me show you guys really quick here. But you guys probably already know this, you're smart kids. But if they put a binding means it worked. So put your price ceiling, we'll just label this price ceiling, make your, right? And if you go over to your supply curve, right, label this quantity ceiling, I guess, QC. And what's happened? We're here, we want to be here. That's bad. Now we're way back here. So it's getting us further away, or you could say it would drive down the quantity supply would fall in the marketplace. Okay, so far so good. If your graph looks like that, yet neater, awesome, good job. You did exactly what you need to do. All right, so let's, oops, no, don't do that. Let's go back here. All righty, and let's go back to our PowerPoint. And now it's your turn to do some practice. So hopefully you thought that was relatively easy. Externalities are a huge thing. For some of you guys, if your teacher's already taught these, and I know a lot of teachers do, they might not follow the exact units in the AP classroom. So some teachers like to teach us right after like our price ceiling, price floor, and then maybe tax graphs and trade graphs and externalities, and they throw them all in there. So for some of you guys, you might say, this is simple. We've already done this. So let's show one more free response here. And there we go. All right, so why don't you guys take about 3 minutes, and you know, if you're looking back at this, you guys could pause it and then take all the answers down. And while you're looking at this, we're gonna go over this tomorrow when we start out and talk about negative externalities. But article in the Wall Street Journal today about college admission for you seniors, and it said they're predicting that this year will be easier to get into college. So if you shot for your dream school out there, good for you, because there's so much confusion right now in the admissions process. They don't know how many international students will be coming in. There's a lot. If you read the article, it's a fascinating article. And so that's first. And they said flat out, kids should be throwing it out there. So if you haven't, you know, applied, get that application out there to kind of the one school that you really want to go to. And then the second one is financial aid, because we're in such flux right now. People's incomes might change. So they said, really keep an eye on that and get them the most updated information. But it's a good article. If you're a senior, you might want to look into that. I'm sure it's on Google and everything else. So there's your current event for the day. Hopefully none of you are, you know, doing anything. Hopefully you're all maintaining good social distance and all that stuff. But as you guys are watching these AP videos, I think it's really, as we hammer away at this review stuff for you guys, our goal is when you guys take that free response, it's just going to be quite easy for you to make sure you get all the points. So you have a positive externality here once again, and A through E, and we'll talk about the point values on this as well tomorrow. So take another minute or so, look through this. If you have your notebook and you're jotting down letters for answers, things like that, or actually doing some math, go ahead and take another, we'll give you 2 minutes and then we'll wrap everything up. Some good stuff on this, right? About a minute left. Price floor, once again, per unit subsidy, deadweight loss. It's all stuff over the last 2 days that are kind of coming together. So you can see now everything's going to make sense. I know one of the things kids struggle with in micro is they think everything's separate, but it's not. At the end of the day, if you start understanding like, oh, supplies, marginal cost, and all these things, these graphs make much more sense when looking at them. As you can see up here as well, right? Marginal private cost equals your marginal social cost because you're not shifting this, but because you shifted demand, marginal private benefit, marginal social benefit to the new one. So that's it. We're going to wrap it up. One last thing for you guys today. First of all, thank you for coming back and watching this. It means a lot that you guys are out there. If you know of anyone that does not have access to the internet, they're trying to get, the College Board's really working on this. They're really trying to make sure every kid has access to these videos. So if you need some tools or connectivity, reach out at cb.org/tech, and they're going to do everything they can. So even if it's not you and it's someone you do know, shoot them an email with that information. And they're really trying to get a hold on this. So it'd be great. So I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow, Friday, last day of the week for you guys to go to school theoretically with these. And then we'll give you the weekend off. We'll come back Monday and talk about private and public goods and free riders and all that kind of good stuff. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you all have a fine afternoon and finish that practice question. We're going to start with that tomorrow. And you guys take care.